It occurs to me that, and I don't want to retread some of the same tire tracks here, but broadly speaking, really what we're talking about is a separation of powers issue. I mean, this is ultimately, when you distill it, this is one way it plays out. As one of the witnesses had remarked, the founders never envisioned this sort of scenario. They certainly never envisioned the scenario, and the abuse that we're seeing here recently sort of puts an exclamation point on it. But I want to use one example of, and it's not a nationwide injunction, but just take Judge Boasberg's ruling here in our nation's capital. When I think the Supreme Court was very clear in Justice Jackson's famous concurrence in Youngstown Steel that the high watermark of presidential power is when you have congressional authorization, when you're actually performing Article II duties as Commander-in-Chief. And the Alien Enemies Act clearly grants that. It's silent. The text of the statute's silent on judicial review, and of course this is pre-Marbury, so they certainly would have never intended that anyway. Yet we've got a judge, and there's other issues at play. Habeas, you've got due process that's sort of at play, but you have a judge that feels compelled to make this sort of decision. And inherently, it's Article II power and or a political question that's not justiciable. I mean, you could go through a number of different questions. Could the court, a few of them here, could a judge have stopped Andrew Jackson from firing on the British at the Battle of New Orleans because we'd already signed the treaty again? Of course, the answer to that is no. Could a judge stop FDR from responding to the Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor because they hadn't formally declared war until 2 hours later? These are questions, these are core Article II powers. So when we talk about the separation of powers, I think we don't teach civics anymore, but if we did, you would learn that the Article III branch, its power is not unlimited either. It's in fact limited. And Congress gets to limit Article III power, which is sort of, I think, one of the reasons we're here today. And I think we've seen, Senator Hawley had the graph of when we've seen this acceleration. And I think the chairman's bill, I'm a co-sponsor of it, I think the time is now. And maybe there is this sort of mutually assured destruction that Senator Schiff is talking about. Maybe these are the conditions by which you actually can get something like this done. But I do want to raise one other question. And Mr. Panaccio, I offer this to you. I mean, it's an open secret. The appellate bar and the politically sensitive litigators know that this randomly assigning district court judge thinks something's wrong here. Something's happening. It is statistically impossible for Judge Boasberg to get the cases he's getting. It's statistically impossible. When I was Attorney General in Missouri, we saw this in the Eighth Circuit. The one Democrat-appointed judge ended up on the panels. It's statistically impossible for that to have happened in that period of time. So I wanted to ask you, what are some reforms that we might consider to ensure that this is truly random? Because if one of the remedies is that you actually have a randomly selected district court judge, then they ought to be a randomly selected district court judge. Do we have like a lottery? Do we have a big wheel? What are some ideas? Because I think there's enough suspicion right now that it's affecting the credibility of the court.
Thank you, Senator. I'm not an expert on the wheels across the country. My general understanding as a litigator is that most courts employ a wheel. How that wheel is weighted can change from district to district depending on the judges. So, for example, in one of my home courts, the Northern District of Florida, there is a public order that tells you exactly how the wheel will work. 35% of the civil cases to this judge, 60% to this judge, 5% to that judge. My own view is that the more transparency courts have, the better, so that at least the public can know this is how the wheel is working. Even if you don't see the wheel operate, you at least know this is the weighting of the wheel, and that can be based on how many active judges you have, how many senior judges you have, how many judges you have in the district, and the geography of the district.
Well, I would just suggest that I think that in addition to what we're talking about here today, there probably ought to be more reforms contemplated, because this, I think, you don't need to be some soothsayer or the oracle at Delphi to understand that there's something amiss here. Thank you. Madam
Thank you,
Chair.
Senator Schmitt. Senator Whitehouse.
Thanks very much.